and we can get started. So, as I mentioned, if everybody could please keep the camera on if they're able to, and we've had a very lovely introduction already. Please use the chat function, and I'd like you to welcome you to the International Association of Business Communicators EMENA Region webinar. And I'm Monique Zitnik, I'm the Vice Chair on the board, and it's my absolute pleasure today to have our top speechwriter, Simon Lancaster, here with us from the UK. His expertise spans from crafting speeches for global CEOs like those at Unilever, HSBC, Intercontinental Hotel Group, and captivating audiences also with his TEDx, which I'm sure most of you have already seen. And it's been viewed over 4 million times. So I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Simon for our recent IABC EMENA podcast, and I'm really looking forward to delving more into the secrets behind powerful speech writing with Simon. So over to you, Simon, and I'll pop the link to the speech or the podcast that we recorded together in the chat for everybody else.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Monique. And thank you all ever so much for joining this lunchtime session on language of leadership, secrets from a speechwriter. I should start by probably admitting the biggest speechwriter secret, which is that it's all a big myth. The image of the speechwriter that you get in these programs like The West Wing and Yes Minister or The Thick of It, the idea of a speechwriter being a kind of puppeteer controlling idiot politicians, if only it were that easy. The basic rule of speechwriting is when it all goes well, it's because the speaker is a genius, and when it goes badly, it's because the speechwriters are bloody idiots. And this is the basic rule that all of us in the speechwriting profession, we live by and we die by as well. So instead of being a puppeteer, rather instead the secret to successful speechwriting is being a lot more of an impressionist. It's being able to see the world as the speaker sees it and to feel what they feel and to speak as they speak. And this is critical if we're going to create a truly authentic speech. And of course, we live in this age of authenticity where everyone demands that. So really what I do as a speechwriter, when I go in and I meet my clients, and this is something I very much had to learn on the job as a speechwriter, it became very important for me almost to shut down my own personality, my own character, my own identity, my own preconceived ideas, my own thoughts on all sorts of issues, and instead just really, really listen intently to what it was that they were saying, where the spikes in emotion were coming, and then capturing all of that. So forgive the kind of grotesque and rather vulgar description, but I sometimes characterize that being a successful speechwriter is more like being an overpaid dictation machine rather than being any kind of artist or Machiavellian puppeteer. But I love doing what I do. You do need to really understand other people and the way that they think, the way that they feel, and the way that they speak, because there's a huge difference between a speaker like, say, Donald Trump on the one hand, whose average sentence is just 10 words long, and a speaker like here in the UK, our King Charles, whose average sentence is 28 words long. So if you're writing a speech for someone like King Charles, you need to keep puffing those sentences out, adding all sorts of adverbs and adjectives and parentheses, and just when you think the sentence is going to end, no, you go somewhere else. You take them round another corner, down another plank, like that. You need the sentences to really be long. Likewise, there's a huge difference between speakers who are almost monosyllabic when they speak. And there's someone like here in the UK, David Cameron springs to mind, who follows George Orwell's maxim that you should never use a long word where a short one will do. And if you contrast his style with someone like Christine Lagarde, well, Christine Lagarde would completely reject Orwell's maxim, and instead she would probably say something like never use a gargantuan word where a diminutive one would do. So deliberately picking long words for them. You need to know what kind of people they admire, your principal admires, so that you can quote from them, tell stories about them. You need to know where they get their emotional energy from. Are they people who are naturally optimistic and sunny, or are they people who actually find their energy in fear, in guilt, in shame, or in anger? And so understanding where they get their emotional energy from. So this is what we try to do. It's a bit like a cross between being a therapist and a spouse, I suppose, being a speechwriter. But you really do need to feel a close affinity with the person that you're writing for. One of the most famous speechwriting relationships in history was the relationship between John F. Kennedy and his speechwriter, a guy called Ted Sorensen. And they were seen as so close that what they used to say in Washington was, when Jack is wounded, Ted bleeds. And I think that kind of almost merging of the two people is exactly what you want in a good speechwriter relationship. But this is something which is absolutely critical. I find it funny, whether you're working in politics, you work in business, you work in social affairs, you see that the speech has an almost unique capacity to terrify these powerful leaders, to get their pulses racing like nothing else. And I think you can see easily why this is, because in every sphere of life, whether you're looking at politics, business, social affairs, we see time and time again the difference between success and failure, those who make it, those who don't, those who fly and those who die, is their ability to connect with massive audiences when it comes to their speeches. And I think you see this very much in politics around the world at the moment. If we just, I mean, there are elections taking place all around the world, but obviously the big one, if you look across the Atlantic Ocean right now, it looks like Donald Trump is probably going to be the next president of the United States again. Now, whatever your view on Donald Trump, whatever your view on his morality or anything like that, and let's not go there, one cannot deny his ability to captivate and connect with gigantic audiences at once. Now, Barack Obama is widely regarded as being an incredible orator, and of course he is an incredible orator. But Barack Obama, even he, I do not think, could keep engaged rallies for 150 minutes in the way that Donald Trump does. Barack Obama has such a soothing smile. I mean, I'm a huge Obama fan, but even I find myself kind of drifting off into a sort of sleep after about 5 minutes. Whereas with Trump, my pulse is racing generally from 2 minutes in and doesn't stop until the end. And this is how you connect with people. Of course, in the UK, we've had Brexit in the last few years. It wasn't the facts that determined which side won that argument. It was the side which was better able to communicate. My speechwriting career started writing speeches for the British government, the same as Stuart Price in Aramco. That's where I first met Stuart, back in Whitehall. And back then, Tony Blair was the Prime Minister here. And Tony Blair was the most extraordinarily gifted communicator who, again, could get people behind him. Gordon Brown, when he took over, not so much. And I think Gordon Brown made the mistake so many leaders make, that he thought having leader in his title made him a leader. He thought if he became Prime Minister, that would give him all the power that Blair had. But Blair's power came not from his title. It came from his ability to inspire, influence, energize people. So we see communication, critical speeches, critical in politics, also very, very much in business. I set up my own business 17 years ago, and I've worked across a number of sectors. And so often you see the difference between the company that's perceived as the good guys and the company that's perceived as the bad guys is one of communication. So one of the instant examples that springs to my mind is the difference between a company like Unilever, on the one hand, and Nestle. Both of them are in the field of FMCG, obviously. Both of them sell very, very similar products. But whereas literally you will get groups of kids at school around the world actively boycotting Nestlé's products. With Unilever around the world, people kind of regard Ben and Jerry's, other brands, Dove soap, as being forces for good. And this is so important that business people in particular are able to communicate the good that they are doing to the planet. We demand that, no less. Obviously, speeches, communication are also critical when it comes to social affairs. Some of the most eminent scientists around the world have been communicating about climate change for 4 decades now, but none of them were able to cut through with the power of that extraordinary, whatever your views about her, 15-year-old schoolgirl as she was, Greta Thunberg, who emerged onto the global scene 4 years ago, 5 years ago, with those incredible words, "Our house is on fire." And with those messages, with that message, she really completely reframed the way that people around the world were seeing climate change. So we know speech is communication, critical to our success, but they're getting harder than ever before to get right. We're now increasingly operating in a virtual environment like we're communicating in today. We're constantly battling for people's attention against the tyranny of emails. The average desk-based employee checks their emails no less than 1,500 times a week, which is an extraordinary challenge for us to overcome. But the good news is, ladies and gentlemen, that there is a secret language of leadership. And it's a secret language that leaders have used since the dawn of time to inspire, influence, energize large numbers of people. And it's a secret language which I have learned and which most of the people who work in my profession as speechwriters have learned as well. And today in my session, I'm going to share with you some of the top secrets, top speechwriter secrets from that secret language, which you will instantly be able to use when you're writing speeches, or if you want to inspire, influence, energize large groups of people. So let me start by scooping you up, if I may, taking you out of Berlin and out of Saudi Arabia. And I'd like to take you back in time, not 100 years, not 1,000 years. I'd like to take you back in time 2,500 years to ancient Greece, when rhetoric, the art of persuasive communication, was something which was taught in schools. It was seen as critical to a good education. And back then, you had probably the greatest book on communication ever written, until my own book came out, obviously, which was written by Aristotle. And what he said was that good communication, an effective speech, needed these three things. You needed ethos, logos, and pathos. Now, ethos is the credibility of the speaker. Are they trusted? Logos is the logic or apparent logic of what they're saying. And even Aristotle said it was only the illusion of logic which mattered in a speech. It didn't need to be scientific logic. It just needed to sound right. And lastly, you've got pathos, which is the emotions of the audience. So this is what Aristotle said was basically the essential components of a good speech. And he said you couldn't win people over with just one of those things. You needed each of the three things to be present. You needed ethos, credibility, logos, reasoning, and pathos, emotion. And as soon as you think about communication from the perspective of someone on the receiving end of communication, and of course you are on the receiving end of communication now, as I try to convince you in this lunch time that Aristotle's rhetoric is relevant for you. Maybe, just maybe, you're looking at me and thinking, is this guy worth listening to? And that's ethos. Is he right, or does he sound right? And that's logos. And lastly, could I give a? And that's pathos, you see. And you see, if in response to those questions, your answer is no to any of them, then the thing is, you're just going to switch off. You're going to stop listening. And that is what we see in so many speeches and presentations, that people just, they switch off, they pick up their phones, or mentally they just tune out and they start daydreaming. So this is the magic formula: ethos, pathos, logos. character, emotion, argument. But if that is all Greek to you, and it is literally all Greek, then let me give you another perspective on communication, another perspective based on neuroscience. Because of developments in neuroscience over the last few years, we now know much, much more about what really goes on in people's brains when they're on the receiving end of communication. And I love this perspective, actually, because you get all sorts of really deep insights to what really goes on in people's brains when they're listening to communication. One of the studies, which I loved, looked at students' brain activity levels during university lectures, and it found they were actually lower than they were when they were asleep. Actually lower, not the same as, or a bit higher, actually lower. Conversely, when people are listening to a story, or when they're hearing metaphors being used, or where they hear moral arguments being deployed, their whole brain starts lighting up. So we understand, the challenge now about how easily people do drift out, but also we understand really how to effectively engage them. So there's lots that all of us as professional communicators can take from the combination of these two words, ancient rhetoric and neuroscience. And there's an extraordinary overlap between the two worlds, because just as there were three parts to Aristotle's rhetoric, ethos, pathos, logos, so too there are three parts to the brain, and they beautifully overlap. So at the bottom of the brain, you've got the instinctive brain, oldest part of the brain, far and away the most powerful part of the brain. Its governing purpose is to keep us alive, which it does in all sorts of ways, constantly scanning our environment and people around us and sending us snap signals about whether we should feel safe or scared. So this is the part of the brain fundamentally that determines whether people have ethos or not. According to studies from Princeton, we decide in a tenth of a second, a blink of an eye, you might say, whether we trust people or not. And once we've made that snap judgment, we very rarely revise it. Instead, we tend to select from the evidence available in order to support whatever that instinctive judgment was. Many of you, I'm sure, will have heard about how juries make their minds up on whether witnesses are going to tell the truth before they've even opened their mouths. There's heaps of findings like that. We're more likely to trust people whose faces are symmetrical than people whose faces are asymmetrical. We're more likely to trust people who have brown eyes than blue eyes or green eyes, which is bad news for me. And we're really likely to trust people who have baby faces. And with all of these, you can see why our instinctive brain might reach these kinds of conclusions. We're programmed basically to trust people with baby faces because we need to love babies. So when you get presented with a baby, you fall in love with it instantly. We're programmed to do that. But equally, this then shifts people's baby face. Well, Jesse, indeed, yeah, you're blessed, my friend. You're absolutely blessed. So that's the instinctive brain. Then above that, we've got the emotional brain. Now, the emotional brain, I kind of think of as being like a powerful drugs factory, releasing all of these powerful hormones, neurotransmitters into our bloodstream when our emotions are stimulated. Now, if you've ever worked for someone, if you've ever worked for a boss who might come in on a Monday morning and said, "What the hell was that crap you sent me on Friday night?" then you'll know that you'll have had an emotional reaction to that boss. When he spoke to you like that, he'll have raised your cortisol levels, making your heart's beats increase, making you focus on what he said, and maybe even, drawing out some sweat as you go into a fight or flight kind of reaction. Now, he's engaging you emotionally by speaking to you in that kind of style, by speaking to fear. Alternatively, maybe you've worked for someone who would say, Jess, here at, Aramco, we've got a deep responsibility to the planet. And I take responsibility seriously. And I'll tell you why I take responsibility seriously, because when I was young, my father said to me 3 words that I will remember till the day I die, and then ... like that. So they're using a moral argument, they're speaking about responsibility, but equally they're storytelling. And when we're receiving moral arguments and we get stories, our oxytocin levels rise, making us feeling warm and fuzzy and also more deeply connected with the person that's given us that message. Alternatively, maybe you've had a boss who would just come in on Monday morning and say, you know, wow, Valeria, what you did last week, it was just the best piece of work I have ever seen. And you know what? You are fantastic. And I don't know what our team would do without you. And if they speak to you like that, your serotonin levels are going to be rising. And that makes you feel big and strong and confident and powerful. And probably, dare I say, Valeria, more likely to agree to tasks if your boss, after flattering you in that kind of way, then says, and would you mind doing this extra piece of work? You'll feel so invincible, you'll be up for it. So you see, the emotional part of the brain is actually very important for leaders, that they connect with people in this kind of way. You can almost think of it, and I sometimes do use recording studios analogies for music, but it's almost like a record producer thinking, let's push this up and let's push that up. Let's push up the oxytocin. Let's push up the serotonin. And if that's a way that's helpful to think about it for you as well, then by all means, nick that metaphor and pump everything up. Pump up your jams. And so that's the emotional part of the brain, you see. Instinctive brain, emotional brain, that's pathos. And then lastly, you've got the logical part of the brain. Lastly, we've got the logical part of the brain. And I mean that lastly, because whilst as human beings, we all tell ourselves that we're supremely logical and rational creatures, the truth is, as human beings, we're just not. The biggest decisions we make in our lives, the houses we buy, the people we marry, the jobs and professions we pursue, rather than really being made on the basis of logic, instead it's the instinctive brain that really guides us towards all of those key things. And not just the big issues in our life, the little small decisions we make throughout the day. We use, instead of rational thinking, we think by heuristics a lot of the time. We think this person's like that person, this issue's like that person. We think through analogy. It's fallacious reasoning a lot of the time. It's not really logical. But the way we use our logical brain instead, rather than really analyzing the logic of most things that come to us, rather instead we use it to create the illusion of logical sounding arguments to justify whatever our instinctive brain has told us. So you see, speaking to instincts, speaking to emotions, speaking to logic, this is the way our brain works. You know, if you're deciding what house to buy, you walk in through the front door, your instinctive brain instantly looks around, compares it with houses you've known in the past, houses you've been happy in, houses you've been unhappy in, and will then form an instinctive basis. And then your logical brain will come in and create an argument saying why it is you can afford that mortgage. You see, it's instinct first. You know, you meet someone at a conference in a bar, your instinctive brain will look at them, you'll think this person's like that person, you'll make a quick connection between them, and then your instinctive brain will come in and it will say why they are a great person. It's your instinctive brain that's driving it along, though. So you see, as speechwriters, as communicators, instead of starting our arguments from a logical perspective, what you need to do is frame it so that it speaks to people's instincts first, then emotions, and then their logical brain. And that's what we do, basically. You know, if you work somewhere like Aramco is stuffed to the brim with scientists and engineers. You know, some of the brightest people on the planet are working there. You have no shortage of people who do logos, do the logical thinking when you're at Aramco. The challenge comes in connecting with people's instincts and their emotions. So this invariably is where the speechwriter and the communications department needs to occupy their time, thinking how, fine, we've got the logical argument sorted. Excuse me. How do we frame this argument in a way that resonates with people's instincts and emotions? There were infinite ways that we can do that, but I'm going to give you some simple models that you can instantly follow, which connect with people's instincts, emotions, and logic. The first one is a beautiful one, actually, for dealing with difficult questions. If someone gives you a difficult question, so you can have this up your sleeve for if you're, you know, briefing your principal to go to a press conference or whatever. Empathy, values, action. Empathies, values, action. With empathy, when you show empathy for someone, you put yourself on their side. You're saying, I get it. I'm with you. I feel your pain. You know, I understand it. That speaks to their instinctive brain. You're saying, I'm part of your tribe. And then by appealing to their values, you connect with them emotionally. All of us believe, you know, we've got a responsibility to look after the future of the planet or whatever it is. You make a values appeal there, and then you talk about what it is that you're doing. So many speakers will leap straight into the action. Well, we've launched this initiative, we've put money into this, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing the other. You need to speak to people's instincts and emotions first. I understand people are worried about this. I understand you're angry about this. I understand you're worried about this, afraid about this, or whatever. Empathy, start with that, then the values appeal, then move forward. So EVA, we call this empathy, values, action. That's a beautiful one. Another lovely one to do is the 3 M's: moral, message, moral, memory, and then message. Moral, memory, and message. And so you start with your moral appeal. Today, I'm going to talk to you about one word and one word only. That word is honesty. Honesty is something which is very important to me, and I'm sure it's very important to all of you. Now, you see, you start with that kind of framing, and instantly people have to pay attention. We might not give a stuff what, sorry, I keep picking on Aramco, but just I know you're at Aramco, Jess. You know, you know, um, it's very important for all of us here at Aramco. Honesty is very important to all of us here at Aramco. And whilst not everyone will care too much about Aramco's strategic plan to 2035 or whatever it is, they do care about honesty, because to be human is to care about honesty. And we all have to worry about honesty. You know, our children say, do you mind taking me to school this morning? Oh God, of course you mind. But it's easy to say, no, darling, it's not a problem. You know, honesty is something we think about in daily action interactions throughout the day. So you engage people instantly, you speak to their instincts by starting with a moral appeal. Then you might come up with a memory. You know, why is it that honesty matters to you? If I say to all of you now, I'd like you to think about, when was the first time in your life that you really discovered the importance of honesty? When did you really discover the importance of honesty? It may be someone was dishonest with you, or it may be that you were dishonest with someone. Now, you see, I've just asked that question here. I have no idea what's going on in all of your brains now, but I bet you any money that your neurons are firing and all of these powerful memories are activating in your mind. And I could share a memory from my own, you know, so I could share a story at that stage, which would then get all of the oxytocin and cortisol flowing. And then you come up with your message. So there you go, 2 powerful models: empathy, values, action; moral, memory, message. But the last model I'm going to show you is a super powerful 6-step structure that you can use instantly to create a super powerful pitch or speech or presentation on any issue in the world. And you'll create a powerful, compelling argument, even if there's no logic there whatsoever. And I will demonstrate this to you afterwards by I'll invite you to challenge me. You can give me the most absurd issue in the world, and I will create for you a compelling speech on the spot using these 6 devices. Okay, so device number 1, 3 breathless sentences. Profits down, markets in turmoil, competitors on the move, conflicts in the Middle East, coronavirus pandemic, cost of living crisis, broken homes, failing schools, sink estates. You see how it works? These are unnaturally short sentences, sentences of 2 words, 3 words or 1 word even. And what you're doing when you use that device, you're mimicking hyperventilating. This is the authentic sound of distress. So it speaks to people's instincts and it pulls them in. Right, okay, what do we know? It's a great way to start. It's an ancient Roman rhetorical device. Julius Caesar used it. Veni, vidi, vici. But we're going to start with it. That's device number 1. Device number 2, 3 repetitive sentences. 3 sentences where we repeat the opening clause in rapid succession. We've got to change the way we work as a business. We've got to change the way we market ourselves as a business. We've got to change the way we develop strategy as a business. By using rhetorical repetition, we sound strong. We sound sincere. We sound sure of our grounds. Is it right that the richest 10 people on the planet have got the same wealth as the poorest 50% of people on the planet? Is it right that every year 250,000 children die around the world because of a lack of access to water and sanitation? Is it right that whilst we're caring about whether or not we've got the latest AI tools installed on our phones, or we've got the latest iPhones or the latest Apple Watches, other people are simply caring about whether they're going to eat that day? Is that right? You see how with this, with this use of repetition, we're generating passion, we're generating energy, we're generating momentum, just like that. Device number 3, we're going to have 3 contrasting sentences, 3 sentences which are either opposites or points of comparison, but critically they sound balanced. Like this, many of the greatest sound bites in history have been created like this, like to be or not to be. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. There's nothing wrong with America that can't be cured by what's right with America. You see how this technique makes you sound measured, not mad, like that. So it's balanced. Device number 4, we're going to have a metaphor. When we use metaphor, we speak about something as something which it is not. We use metaphor all of the time. As a speechwriter, one of the things that is really important for me to do is listen very carefully to my principal and identify what metaphors they use. How do they see their company? Some people talk about their company as a person. They might talk about the heart of the company. They might talk about its DNA. They might talk about the company standing tall and proud and being full of ambition and moving forward, and they might love that. They might love that image. That might be what's locked in their mind. Or they might talk about their company as a car. And then they might talk about driving change, accelerating reform, having their foot on the pedal and having a change of gear and getting the components in place. So the metaphor we use is fundamental to the way that people then see what we're talking about. When we use metaphor, we create images, little movies in people's mind that then make a profound difference to how they think, feel, and act. So that's device number 4. Device number 5, exaggeration. We're working night and day. We're giving our heart and soul. We're throwing everything that we've got at this. Now, exaggeration has had a bad rap in recent years, largely because of the orange president who's likely to come back. But the truth is that this has been a powerful rhetorical device which has been used by many of the greatest leaders in history. Steve Jobs loved exaggeration. Martin Luther King loved exaggeration. Gandhi loved exaggeration. And the thing is, to be human is to exaggerate. In everyday conversation, when we're speaking to people, we exaggerate all the time. I just don't think I can take it anymore. I didn't sleep a wink last night. We all exaggerate all the time. So it's natural. That's device number 5. Device number 6, we're going to end with a rhyme. Why? Because rhyme is sublime, and when it rhymes, it chimes, and a rhyme does not cost a dime. And people are more likely to believe it's true if it rhymes as well. So they are the 6 steps. They're really powerful. Speakers have used this since the dawn of time. These devices are key to the language of leadership. One of the easiest hits that I achieve with my leaders, with my clients, they can send me a speech of the most turgid prose, And I can do little more than just go through that speech very, very quickly and just sprinkle these devices in. And instantly you've got a powerful sounding speech. It's very, very quick, actually. For any of you working in comms, if you've just got some prosaic junk landed in your inbox, just sprinkle these devices on. People will say, oh my God, it's amazing. Fantastic. How did you do that? And just say, oh, it's years. It took me years. No, you learned it in a 1 hour lunch and learn session with IABC. So there you go. So I did promise to you that you'd be able to put me on the spot and that I would improvise a speech for you. So I wonder if any of you has a wicked challenge up their sleeves that you would like to present me with now, and I'll give you a speech on the spot in return.
Would anyone like to unmute, and maybe if we start with a couple of topics or
I mean,
think,
we can go with an all-out Monique if you want.
yes,
Um,
please.
let's go with nuclear war is a good idea.
Nuclear war is a good idea. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. I mean, it's so
You did
random.
want a challenge, right? So
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I want. So I'm making the case for nuclear war. Okay. Planet under pressure. Food and water shortages. Too many people wanting too much. We have a responsibility to ensure our planet is sustainable. We have a responsibility to ensure our planet feeds, waters, and supplies all its citizens. We have a responsibility to ensure our planet is fit for the future. At the moment, we have too many people, not enough resources. And whilst we lie to ourselves and pretend that this is sustainable for the future, the truth is we all know it's not. And instead of continuing to hide our heads in the sand on this matter, the time has come for us to confront the truth that we know is staring us in the face right now. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth is other solutions to these problems have been tried and have failed. The time now is right for us to take truly decisive, determinate, and drastic action, which will ensure that our planet has the correct number of people to survive for the long term. Now, we can do this. We can just knock out, I don't know, maybe 7/8 of the planet in a flash, in a second. They won't even know it's happened. It won't harm or hurt anyone. So the answer is clear. We need to go nuclear. That was the worst rhyme. I'm so sorry. It was getting there. That was it. I completely. I need to redo that rhyme. The rhyme completely. I
scary.
completely lost.
That is
War,
scary good.
war.
Wow.
I tell you what it is good for. That's it. That's what I should. And this, I'm sure. There we go. Push the button. There you go. Thank you, Valeria. So
Thank you.
anyway, there you go. Yeah, I kind of lost it at the end there, but it was going all right up to then. What did you think? Was that rubbish? Was that a load of junk? Did you throw that out? Would you vote for nuclear?
Constanti, you're the requester.
I mean, obviously this is a very out there example, but it's scary how effective this is. Thanks for that example. I mean, obviously you're doing this in 90 seconds, but I can see how this can be used in many, many ways. Very effective.
Indeed. Yeah, that's right. And last week actually, I was in Germany. I don't know whether I mentioned to you, I was in Germany last week. I was in Essen, and I was there working with Eon on International Women's Day, and someone set me the challenge saying women should be paid less. than men. It is right to mark International Women's Day. I was given that as a challenge. So quite often I am asked to make the most absurd arguments. But you're right, Konstanty. It is scary how easy it is to make something which is bonkers sound reasonable doing this kind of technique. But there you see that we have a responsibility to use these techniques wisely, to use them well. The analogy I come up with is it's like a pen. Rhetoric is like a pen. It's on its own, it's morally neutral. You know, you can use a pen to write a love letter to someone, or to, you know, to be kind to someone, to show great kindness to someone, or you can use it to write a hate letter. You know, on its own, it's neither good nor bad, but our responsibility is to use rhetoric for good. You know, and I can show you some examples. Would you like to see some examples of people using some of these techniques for good? Would that be interesting to you? I have some good examples up my sleeve, and then we'll still have time for questions afterwards if I show some. Would you
I
be up
just
for
wanted to
seeing?
grab I just wanted to grab 1 minute because what you're talking about, I'm sure you've seen the Will Steven TEDx talk where he talks about nothing and everyone goes along with it.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched that one, I really highly suggest it because he's using all of these techniques, and in the end, you go, "Wow, that was a great speech!" And of course, the whole theme of the speech is it's absolutely a speech about nothing.
Yeah. He was the TEDx New York guy, was he? It was like,
Yeah, where he goes,
I'm gonna take my glasses off.
"Yeah, I'm
That
gonna
one.
take my glasses. I'm gonna put them back on again. I'm gonna make some hand gestures here. You're gonna
Yeah.
like them because they're
Yeah.
big. And then I'm gonna lean in, and I'm
I love
really
that.
gonna bring it bring it all together."
I love that. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. I was quite jealous when he did that. I thought I wish I'd done that TEDx talk. That was really
Yeah,
good.
it's I show it to people that I work with all the time because I want them to understand it's really so much more about how you say it than what you say. It's important what you say, but it's really
Yeah.
important how you say it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you what, I don't want to waste our time looking at videos. I'm going to advise you actually to look at some great examples afterwards. Just look at Obama afterwards. Look at Biden. Look at Trump. Look at Boris Johnson. Look at Taylor Swift. Look at Ronaldo. Look at Malala. Look at Oprah Winfrey. Look at these. Look at any of the great leaders that you admire, and you're going to see these devices all over their speeches. It's good to actually, let's use the time to just chat. You're comms professionals, you have your own work challenges. I'd be interested to hear how this session has resonated with you and whether there's anything specific you'd like to ask me while I'm on.
You can just pop up your hand or unmute if you'd like to ask Simon a question. Simon, I just wanted to quickly say it was scary, good, and absolutely terrifying at the same time. I think the only challenge that you had was trying to keep a straight face
Yeah.
during your speech, and it was very, very convincing. It does make me worry for the people wielding the weapon, though.
Well, this is why my argument is actually that everyone needs to know these devices. And if we all know these devices, then we can all call them out when we see them. We're aware what's being done. But I think the danger is when people are not aware, and that does make them vulnerable. You know, we came a bit of a cropper, as I mentioned earlier on Brexit, when facts just didn't really play a role whatsoever. And instead, the Brexiteers were so good at speaking to people's instincts, particularly in their use of metaphor. They talked about Brexit as if it was food at every opportunity. And so Boris Johnson would say about, we're going to have our cake and eat it. And we've got an oven ready deal. These were his big lines that he used over and over again. And of course, by speaking about food, you speak to people's instincts in the deepest and most powerful way, because one of our most overwhelming instincts is the need to feed ourselves, which is, of course, why food imagery in web communication is so powerful. You know, I remember one person saying to me about how they would deliberately just put a picture of a croissant on with their adverts because they knew that would drive up their traffic by, like, particularly if they put it on at like 11 o'clock in the morning when everyone's getting a bit peckish. it would drive up their traffic on that site by like 11, by 60%, I think it was. It was extraordinary. It was a massive leap.
I have another question for you, but I first wanted to check if there was anyone else who had a question for Simon. Valeria?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Thank you so much for, I wouldn't say it's like a lecture, it's more like a workshop for me, because that was really inspiring. And you mentioned that you should have this special connection with the person for whom you're creating the speech. And usually in the reality, for example, when you are new in the team or when you're out of time to build this connection, do you have any tips how to do it like in a short time, how to do it effectively without, spending the years with the person to build a better speech for them?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is I have to do this with my clients really quickly now, because I'll quite often get brought in just to help with one speech. And before meeting the principal, I might have an hour to do research before I get in with them. And so now I hoover up everything that I can find on social media about that person. Everyone these days, it's very rare now that someone will get in touch and I can't instantly watch them on YouTube. Do you know what I mean? And then I'm capturing their authentic voice. So these things like short words or long words, short sentences, long sentences. They like rhetoric, not like rhetoric. What are they into? Where do they get their passion from? Where do they get their energy from? I can normally do a pretty good style guide to someone just in an hour. And some of the things you want to look for, like what do they like doing in their spare time? Because that's brilliant in a speech. If you can bring in some of their hobbies, some of their passions, some things that they're saying about their family. If they're on Instagram, they're on Twitter, normally you're going to get some good stuff from there. Are they into cricket? Do they watch the rugby? Do they like going to restaurants? Are they into opera or whatever? And then these can give you brilliant hooks for speeches that are a bit more imaginative. No one really cares about the corporate strategy to 2035. You know what I mean? Let's tell the truth. No one really cares about it. Normally, even the people that wrote the bloody strategy don't care about it too much. But if you start talking about, something artistic, something sporting, something to do with family, something personal, something where there's a bit more of a personal interest, people will engage and people will listen, especially when you kind of flag up those moral aspects to it that I was leaning into, that this was an issue about, integrity or honesty or responsibility or something like that. But I completely sympathize. And I know, Valeria, that it's really hard to get FaceTime with the people that you're writing speeches for. But my argument is that there's a lot you can do behind the scenes.
Thank you, Simon. We've got another question. Do you ever say no?
Yeah, I have.
Maybe our guest would like to
Yeah,
expand on that. I'm not sure of your name.
yeah.
Hello, my name is Lars. Hi, Monique.
Hello,
Yeah,
Lars.
I work with storytelling, and I sometimes find it's kind of a tool to do something else. And I hear what you were saying about the rhetoric part of it. It's kind of a very powerful tool, and in the wrong hands, you might do more harm than good. And so I sometimes say it's not for me because maybe the intention of what I bring to the table, the tool I bring, is not where I don't like it. I don't agree with it. I think it's cheeky or, all sorts of reasons. Do you find yourself in that situation also?
I've only found myself in that situation once. And I've had my business 17 years now. In politics, when I worked as a speechwriter in government, I had a tricky moment about the Iraq War. I was against that war, but I was having to write speeches which were in favor of that war. And that was pretty much as difficult as it gets. And with that, I walked away, actually, and I left. I took a sabbatical. I left and spent a year away because I was very unhappy about having to write speeches in that environment. But since setting up my business, there was only one company It was a tech company. And I really did not like their vision for the future. I really did not like their vision for the future. It scared me shitless, actually. And so I was not happy about it. But I mean, for me, I've worked with all of the big oil companies. I've worked with big tobacco. I've worked with booze companies, and I know there are some people that would judge me for taking that work. My view is I drive a car, I drive a petrol car, I fly. What kind of hypocrite would be if I be if I'm prepared to buy oil as a consumer, but then not work for an oil company? You know, and likewise when it comes to booze companies, I like a drink, you know. I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not a boozer. I'm a very occasional drinker, but you know, I have no problem with that. And with tobacco, as far as I'm concerned, if it's legal for people to smoke, I'm cool with that, you know. So I mean, I do work in an ethical way. I think because of the nature of what you do as a speechwriter, what I do as a speechwriter, it requires you to see issues from lots of different perspectives. So I have become, as I've got older, and the longer I've done this job in particular, I'm far less binary in my thinking. There are a lot, I think when you're young, when you're a teenager or whatever, you're like, these people are bad. You know, if you do this, you're a bad person. I actually believe that everyone believes what they're doing, they are doing for a good reason, you know? And even some of the most evil people on the planet, actually, you know, they've created some screwed up justification, like I demonstrated with the nuclear war argument. I mean, some people would argue the planet needs a much smaller population. There is an argument to be had there, you know. So it's all about perspective. It's quite tricky, and ethically it's tricky, but we all do our best. We all try to be good, don't we? And we can't do any more than that.
We have one very last question. I am conscious of the time. Alachi, did you want to ask yourself?
Yes, thank
Lovely to
you.
see you.
Good to see you all. My name is Olachi. I work in internal comms. Thank you, Simon, for your very informative workshop. I've learned a lot so far. I had to just write everything down so I don't miss anything. So thank you. So my question is about facing this blank page syndrome. So you're given an assignment to write a speech, and then you're looking at this white paper and you're thinking, okay, what do I write? What do I do? Have you ever faced this before? How did you overcome this?
Yeah, what I do is I don't look at the blank sheet of paper. I will get out and go for a walk, and I will then dictate to my phone, and you will find inspiration will come to you. If you look at a blank sheet of paper, there is nothing there to stimulate your brain whatsoever. If you look at the internet, there's too much to stimulate your brain. You end up going down rabbit holes, and so that's a bad place. So what I always do to get my brain going, I will go for a walk, and I'll think about the issue that I know I'm having to write a speech about, and I will just dictate stuff. And that will get me going. I'm a big fan of morning swimming. I don't know if you're a swimmer, Alachi, but I generally, in the 1 hour that I spend swimming every morning, I will come up with the ideas and inspiration that I'm then drawing on for the whole of the day, actually. That it's in that 1 hour when I'm underwater, when I literally can't tap on any device or be distracted in any way. That's when my brain will start really creating. So a nice excuse for you to go for a walk.
So much, Simon, and I encourage everyone to reach out to Simon on LinkedIn and bombard him with all of your questions. And please, obviously, he has some fabulous books you can look up on Amazon. And if you know of anyone who needs a brilliant speechwriter, I think Simon's already shown us what he's capable of in a hair blink of an eyelid. If anyone
Yeah.
would like to know more about the IABC, please, I've put the link to the IABC membership. We have a MENA region, and we've completely focused on developing and forwarding the communications profession in our region. I also am looking for podcast guests. So please do reach out to me if you know of anyone. Simon was absolutely brilliant, and I feel privileged to have interviewed you there, Simon. Thank you again.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Monique, for organising this, and thank you everyone for joining. And please do get in touch with me. I do run workshops on the language of leadership. I'd love to come to your company, to your country, and run one. I have been out to Aramco and run a few language of leaderships there over the years. And yeah, please do get in touch with me, and wishing you all the best with your comms careers.
Thank you so much. I'll let everyone go now. At the end of the hour, Simon, I'll sit on the call just to thank you as well.